Gentlemen, what is going on today? My name is Ryan Mickler, and I am the host and the founder of this podcast and the Order of Man movement. I want to welcome you here. I've got a very, very important conversation for you today. And in looking back over the past 5.5 years, as best as my memory can recall, I don't think we've talked about this. I think this is a subject that is often overlooked, and I wanted to bring some attention to it today. So we're going to get to that in here in just a minute. Before we do, I just want to let you know a couple of things. Number one, I want to thank you. This month is shaping up. In fact, it is the highest downloaded month that we have had in podcasting since I started recording 5.5 years ago. So the movement is growing. The mission is growing. Our reach is growing. The visibility is growing. The word is getting out, guys. And that is all you. All right. We bring great guests on. Yes, I try to improve my skills and my capacity as a podcaster and the leader of this movement. But it's you that is sharing the episodes, talking about what we're addressing, having these types of conversations, joining with us, banding with us on our social media platforms, and generally just getting the word out. And I want to thank you for doing that. And I want to encourage you to continue to do that, because now more than ever, with the election coming up and with COVID-19 and just everything. I mean, writing and race issues and all that we're dealing with in 2020, murder hornets and other things, that alien spacecraft that has been confirmed by the Pentagon. I mean, this stuff's crazy. 2020 is crazy. And the crazier that it gets, because it will, I mean, we're just over halfway into this year, which seems like it's been a decade this year. It's apparent to me that men are more needed now, I think, more than any other time in history, possibly. I'm thinking about World War II. I'm thinking about the American Revolution. You know, those are dire times as well. But I think this is stacking up to be a very interesting, to put it mildly, next several years. So guys, we need to make ourselves more capable. That's what this podcast is all about. It's about giving us the tools and the conversations and resources and guidance and input and direction, perspective that we need to thrive as husbands, fathers, business owners, leaders in our community, just men in general. And that's my goal. Today, obviously, is your Friday Field Notes. You get to hear from me, for better or worse, for the next 20 or 30 minutes or so. And again, I think I've got a good one lined up for you today. All right. The other thing I wanted to mention, if you would, please just leave a rating or review. I actually went in and I thought I had rated my friend Andy Frasilla's podcast, Real AF, and I hadn't, surprisingly. So I went into the iTunes podcast player on my phone and I clicked 5 stars, and it literally took me 2 seconds. Legitimately 2 seconds. Okay, so guys, if you've ever got any value from what we're doing here, please just go in. At a minimum, click 5 stars. We're at like 4,200 ratings right now. If you want, leave a review as well. Let the guys know what you think about the show. But at a minimum, just click 5 stars. Takes you 2 seconds. All right. And it, believe it or not, goes a long way in promoting what we're doing here. All right. Outside of that, check out the Battle Ready program. It's a free course, a 30-day email course. You're going to get a series of 17 emails over 30 days. They're going to walk you through becoming battle ready, to become hardened, to become ready, to become prepared for what you want to accomplish in the last quarter of this year. So you can check that out at orderofman.com/battle ready. All right, guys, let's talk about it today. I want to talk with you about a resource, a tool that is probably, in my experience and in talking with thousands and thousands of men across the planet, one of the most underrated and underutilized tools available to you and every other man, and that is your intuition. Now, as I talk about this, you're probably going to hear some spiritual undertones because I am a believer. If you are, great. I think you'll understand it from that context. If you're not, you know what? It doesn't matter, because this tool is still available to you. So whether you decide to call it your intuition or your conscience or a sixth sense or the Holy Ghost or God or Jiminy Cricket, for all I care, there is power in tapping into this I'm just going to call it intuition today for the sake of argument. But you guys understand now what I'm talking about. It could be, again, the Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost, God, your conscience, whatever. Again, however you want to look at it. I'm just going to call it intuition for the sake of this conversation. And you guys can interpret it how you feel necessary, okay? There is power in your intuition. And it's difficult because it's hard to quantify, right? Like if we think about rationale, if we think about reasoning, if we think about logic, usually what we're talking about is looking at information, readily available information, and then interpreting it, running through a series of thoughts or a system or a program in order to translate what that information or that data is telling us, and then using it to create the best possible outcome for ourselves, whether it's in our business or our personal lives. But when it comes to intuition, it's very difficult because a lot of the times it's very intangible. Like it's just a feeling, like it's a gut feeling. That's another term for it. It's your gut feeling, right? It's your gut telling you. And how do you quantify that? Like how do you articulate that? When somebody asks you, why do you think that? And you have to say, oh, I don't know, it's just a gut feeling I have. It sounds a little silly, right? Because as grown men, we ought to have a reason for it. We ought to be able to articulate it, to be able to explain it in a rational way. That's what we hear, right? Rational. You need to be able to rationally explain everything that you're doing in every situation. Well, I really don't believe that's the case. I don't believe that's the only metric or that's the only tool or input that we can use to create effective outcomes for ourselves and the people that we care about. So I want to share with you a quick experience. And for every one of these experiences I can share with you, I've got 1,000 more that I won't share with you for the sake of time and attention and energy. But the other day, I had made a post about this experience. Very brief, seemingly insignificant experience I had with my wife. And I didn't expect much attention from it. I was just explaining what had happened, and I like to share these stories because I think it helps men. That's obviously what I've been doing over the past almost 6 years now. And to my surprise, actually, it really got a lot of attention. There was a lot of feedback. There was a lot of comments, a lot of positive comments, a lot of questions, like genuine questions about what it is I was talking about when I'm talking about this thing called quote-unquote intuition. Guys were asking, is that a feeling? Is that an emotion? What is it? I'm going to explain that here in a minute. So let me tell you the story. The other day, my wife came to me and she said, hey, I'm going to take my brother-in-law to the airport because we had family out here visiting. So I'm going to take my brother-in-law to the airport, my brother-in-law, back to the airport with his family. And then on the way back, I'm going to run some errands. I got to go to the hardware store. I got to go pick up a picture that I had framed for me. So she was going to pick that up. And then she said, and then I'm going to go to the car wash, and I'm going to have the car washed, and then I'm going to vacuum out the car because we'd been at the beach and the lake and things like that. And so she wanted to clean all the dirt and sand and everything out of there. And so initially I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. And then the more I thought about it, and I know this sounds silly, guys, but stick with me on this, all right? The more I thought about it, I was like, I don't feel good about her going to the car wash. I can't explain it. I can't tell you exactly what it was. I just had this like gut feeling that she shouldn't go to the car wash. Like I had no problem with her going to the hardware store, no problem with her picking up the frame, like none of that stuff. But for whatever reason, the car wash, it just stuck out with me. And I'm like, I don't feel good about that. I just had this thought that, she'd be alone and she'd be vacuuming out her car, and, she'd be knee deep in that, like vacuuming out the back of the Suburban. And I don't know. I just didn't feel right about it. That's it. That's all. I can't explain it. And that's the point, guys. Like I can't articulate it to you. Somebody said, well, explain more about your feelings, what you felt and what was the experience. I don't know. That's kind of the problem. That's why a lot of us men tune out this thing that I'm calling for, again, for the sake of this conversation, intuition, is because we can't fully articulate it, and so we feel stupid. I even put that in my Instagram post. I said, I hesitated sharing this because I sound like I think I used the term misogynistic, paranoid weirdo. And I might sound like that to you right now. Like I just didn't have a good feeling about it. And I think most of you guys can relate to that, right? Like you've all had experiences where you're like, that just doesn't feel right to me. So initially I said, yeah, no problem. I'll just see you when you get back. I'll have the kids and we'll have dinner tonight and we'll do our thing. Well, I was thinking about it, and I had this gut feeling, and it wasn't good. So a couple minutes later, I said, hey, can I talk with you about something? She said, yeah. And so I just pulled her aside, pulled her into the bedroom or whatever, and I said, hey, I'm just feeling really off about you going to get the car washed today. I don't know why. I just feel like you shouldn't do that today. And without hesitation, and frankly, somewhat surprisingly, not a single ounce of hesitation from her. Not a single ounce. When I said, I'm feeling weird about it, I don't think you should do that today. She simply looked at me and said, okay, I'll do it another day. Now, there's a whole other conversation in there that we can have and we can talk about. And we will. We'll talk about that later. If you guys are interested in some of my thoughts on that, because there's another message embedded in there, which is about trust and authority. Not authority, maybe influence. Influence is the better word. There's a whole other story. You guys can check it out on Instagram. It's at Ryan Mickler. So make sure you're connected with me over there. There's like 68,000 of you are. So the other 40, 50, 60,000 of you need to make sure you connect with me over there so we can continue these conversations. Again, separate conversation. So yeah, she says, all right, well, yeah, I'll just go a different day. I'm like, okay, well, that sounds good. And I think she'll probably go today or tomorrow and she'll get it done. And I don't think I'll have as much of a worry. But for whatever reason, for that day, I had a concern about it. And I shared this, and I was amazed at how many people resonated with that. I'm sure as you're listening to this, you resonate with that as well. The problem is, guys, is that our intuition, I believe, is one of the most, if not the single most, underrated and underutilized tool that we have available. Your job as a man, one of your jobs, we talk about the 3 Ps, protect, provide, preside. I'm going to talk about preside, which is synonymous with leadership. Your job as a man is to lead. Lead yourself first. Like if you can't lead yourself, you can't lead anybody else. All right, so start there. Be committed, be a man of your word, honor what you say, honor your commitments. Lead yourself first. Do what you know you need to be doing, that sort of thing. All right, got it. Then from there, we start moving out in a circular fashion. So we move from being a man of your word to leading yourself, to now leading your kids, leading your wife, leading your neighbors, your community members, your employees, your colleagues, your coworkers, and then you just continue to branch out. And for example, I have within this podcast, because we're reaching hundreds of thousands of men, if not millions of men, through the work we're doing here. But I can only reach you to the degree that I lead myself. And the more I lead myself, the more equipped I am to lead other individuals. So preside is synonymous with leadership. Why do I bring this up? Well, guys, as a leader, your job is to take all of the available, I'm going to call it intel. All of the available intel that you have at your disposal, and then aggregate it, and then make decisions based off of it. So what a lot of people will do is they'll simply take, again, I'm calling it intel. They'll simply take the intel of emotion, right? How do I feel about a situation? And they'll make their decisions based off that intel alone. Right? We see this with, frankly, we see this with the looting and the rioting and the vandalism and the chaos that's happening in the streets. I mean, specifically, my attention is drawn to Portland and Seattle and some of these areas. These are not rational human beings, guys. These are emotional human beings. And I'm not saying, by the way, we should discount our emotion. It's intel. It's not inaccurate. It's incomplete. That's what we need to understand about emotions. See, a lot of people will think, well, I should never look at my emotions. No, that's ridiculous. Whether you're a creationist or you believe in evolution or you fall somewhere in between, which is where I happen to fall. I think both can exist. I think that we have been, man, woman, have been created by a creator, and also we have evolved. I believe in both. And regardless of what side of the spectrum or somewhere that you sit on that spectrum, it's clear to me that we have emotion because it served us. Now, sometimes it might betray us, but how could it betray us? Think about that. If we've developed or been gifted with this ability to have emotion, and it's good and it's helpful, how can it betray us? Well, it can betray you if you're not looking at other factors, other intelligence. So, for example, I saw this meme probably years ago now. You guys have probably seen it. Or it's a cartoon. It's not a meme. It's a cartoon. But there's two individuals sitting, face to face, and they're looking at each other, and they're looking at this image on the ground. And the image to one individual on the left, let's say, it looks like the number 6 because it's facing him, and it looks like the number 6. To the individual on the right, looking at the same image, nothing's changed except for the perspective, but it's the same image. It looks like the number 9. Who's right? Who's wrong? Neither are right, and neither are wrong. From the limited perspective of the man on the left, it looks like a 6. From the limited perspective to the man on the right, it looks like a 9. Neither one of them are wrong from their perspective, based off the limited intel that they have. So your emotions, guys, whether you're angry or upset or mad or glad or happy or jealous or greed or whatever you're experiencing right now, is not bad. It's not the enemy. We hear that. I think we translate that when we hear these individuals that talk about emotions and check your emotions and don't be emotional. We interpret that as like, turn those emotions off. No, guys, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying it's part of the intel package. It's part of what should be considered. The other part is, or another part, is logic. It's reasoning. It's rationale. It's just understanding, and it's trying to look at other people's perspective and looking at it logically. I mean, this is something that we need to take into consideration too. And I actually feel like if we want to go back to these riots and this vandalism and the violence that we're seeing in the streets, if more of these individuals would like not stop being so emotional, but just embrace some other intel, like logic, reasoning, rationale into the equation, I think we turn a lot of this stuff off. The problem is these I say kids, I say it like I'm some old man. These kids never learned how to use it, right? Because they threw temper tantrums when they were 6. They threw temper tantrums when they were 10 and when they were 16. And because they threw themselves on the ground and they bitched and they moaned and they cried, literally at times, cried and banged their fist on the ground, mom and dad or whoever gave them what the hell they wanted. And they thought to themselves, what they started to formulate the connection is like, if I just throw a temper tantrum based on the way I feel, then I'll get what I want. This is what we see. This is the problem. And they never learned to use the intel of reasoning and logic and rationale. And you can see it on Facebook. I mean, how many people, and I've tried to make a conscious effort of this, of not getting emotional, not getting overly emotional, not reacting and responding based on emotion alone. I can be mad, that's fine. But my response to people or to situations should not be reactionary based on the input of emotion alone. So we've got these two sides of the spectrum, right? We've got emotion and then we've got logic and reasoning. Well, there's a third component here, guys. There's a third set of data. There's a third set of intel. And it's intuition. I don't look at intuition as a feeling like I would another emotion. It is a feeling, but not like another emotion. Like I don't look at intuition as like angry or happy or guilty or greed or lust. I don't look at it as an emotion. It's something else entirely. And I wish I could tell you, maybe you guys can articulate it better than I can, but I wish I could tell you exactly what it was. I can't, and that's part of the problem. That's why it's one of the most underused and underrated mediums of intel that we have available because we can't articulate it. So what do we think as men with these fragile egos? And I think generally this is more true of men than women, is like our ego, right? Like, oh, I want to be able to explain myself and prove what I'm thinking and show the world what it is I'm after. There's nothing wrong with that, unless it's producing negative outcomes for yourself because you're taking it too far. But when people say, well, why would you do that? And you can't explain it, it sounds stupid. You sound ridiculous. And so it threatens our fragile ego. And so what do? We tune it out. Or we dismiss it, right? Like, I don't. Nah. So what could I have done in this situation with my wife, for example? Well, I had that intuition. I had that feeling, right? Not an emotional feeling, but an intuitive feeling, a gut feeling, different than emotional feeling, separate, right? I could have said, no, that's stupid. What are you worried about? Don't worry about it. That's stupid. Don't worry about that. Just blow that off. And I could have said nothing about it, and she would have went and, look, in 10 scenarios, 9 or more of them would have turned out okay. But the one may not have turned out okay. Maybe she would have gotten in a car accident on the way to get the car washed. Maybe she would have been assaulted or robbed. I don't know. And that's the problem. I can't prove it. Here's the other problem. Because I decided to listen to my intuition, I will never know whether it was accurate or not. Like, I can't put it to the test. That's a problem, right? For a rational man, and I tend to be pretty rational, I think, most of the time. Not always, but most of the time. It's difficult for me because I don't get any feedback. Right? Like, I can't test whether or not I was right or wrong. That's part of the problem for a lot of you guys and why you tune out this underrated and undervalued and underused intel at your disposal, is because you can't prove whether you're right or wrong. And so it's easy to dismiss. It's easy to overlook. It's easy to say, nah, that's stupid. I don't need to worry about that. Well, guys, I'm here to tell you that it takes some faith in yourself. It takes some faith in who you are. And look, here, what is the risk? Right? If I tell my wife, for example, in this scenario, hey, hon, I don't feel good about that. Will you do that another day? And she says, yeah, I'll do that another day. There's no risk to that involved at all. There's none at all. There's no downside to that other than it kind of messes with her day a little bit and she's got to readjust, or I've got to readjust, and it's fine. We get on about our day. So it's not, intuition and the feelings that I have are not something that I'm willing to negotiate with. It's not something I'm willing to gamble with. Even though I can't prove whether or not it's right or wrong, I'm not willing to gamble with it. I'm not. And I don't think you should be either. So guys will ask me, well, Ryan, how do you develop this gift? And I believe it is a gift. I believe it's a divine gift. Whether you believe that or not, fine, whatever. But I believe that it's divine. And how do you develop that? Well, guys, it's like any other muscle. Right? Like if you stop running or you stop lifting or you stop sports when you were younger, your muscles are going to atrophy naturally because you're not using them. Now, the more you use them, of course, they're going to get stronger. I think the same thing can be true about your intuition. And how does that intuition manifest itself? It manifests itself as God, this is the problem. I can't even explain it. It's different, I think, for everybody because I've heard people talk about it differently. To me, it might manifest itself as a voice or just a presence or just an uneasiness. I think that's the way I would say it, just an uneasiness. And I listen and I apply. And because I exercise it and I utilize it, it gets stronger, it gets more prevalent, and I'm more attuned to it and I'm more aware of it because I use it. But if every time I felt uneasy about a situation, if I dismissed it and brushed it off and mocked it as something that isn't important, well, why would it continue to develop and get stronger? It wouldn't, right? It would atrophy like any other muscle, like I said a second ago. So how do you get better at developing the gift of intuition? You exercise it. If you have this feeling, this gut feeling, something's wrong, something's off, something's right, something's to be avoided, or something's to be worked towards, then probably you ought to exercise it. And then that voice, if you want to look at it that way, I choose to look at it that way, that voice gets stronger and more prevalent and louder. And you become more aware of it. You listen to it. You become more attuned to it. And it serves you well. Guys, this is a little bit different podcast that I've had in the past as I'm thinking about this because, I usually give you a framework, like do these 10 things. Well, the problem with this is I don't have 10 things to tell you. In this Instagram post that I made, guys had said, well, like, how do you know if it's just being paranoid? I don't know. Again, that's one of the problems. I don't know. Maybe it is just paranoia. But I don't think it is. I don't think it is. Here's why. Because I'm a rational human being. Just like I told you that we shouldn't operate, for example, on emotion alone, we shouldn't operate solely on intuition. There's other factors. Like, I'm a rational human being. I'm pretty level-headed. I feel like I'm somewhat intelligent. Not always, but, I feel like I'm a smart guy. I don't think I'm overly emotional. I don't make rash decisions. I'm pretty even keel. I'm pretty level-headed. So because I'm willing to utilize those other sets of intel, like we had talked about earlier that I have, when I do have something that's very strong, that feels very strong, I'm like, I better listen to this. Because normally I'm pretty level-headed, I'm pretty rational, I can pretty well explain my position. And in this case, I can't explain it, but I'm feeling it, and this is actually different than what I've been experiencing in the past, so I probably ought to listen to this. Now, if you consider yourself a very emotional person, somebody who gets wrapped up in the way you feel and you go off your instinct and your feel, and that's all you do, well, okay, maybe you ought to question that a little bit more because maybe it is just your emotions. Maybe it is just your intuition. But when you look at this as a total package, that's how you can begin to determine whether or not it's worth listening to. It's like the trifecta of intel. It's emotion, it's reasoning, logic, and it's your intuition. All three have to be working. Now, sometimes my emotion will take more control. Sometimes my rationale, my logical thinking will take more control. Sometimes my intuition will take more control. But because I know and I'm accustomed to all three sets of data or input, and one happens to be more prevalent in a certain circumstance, well, I'm willing to listen to that. Because in any other circumstance, I'm pretty level-headed. That's how we know. And then, guys, you got to exercise on faith, all right? Faith is taking action when you can't prove that it's there. It's not even a spiritual term necessarily. It's used mostly in a spiritual context or religious context. But faith is just operating without the data, without the input. You guys have to have faith that you're intelligent, that you're emotional, and I don't say that negatively, and that we have access to this underused and underrated tool called intuition. And you have to have faith that if you exercise and make decisions based on this intel, that you're going to be okay. And not only are you going to be okay, you're going to thrive. You're going to keep yourself out of dangerous and difficult circumstances, and you're going to put yourself into circumstances where you have abundance and opportunity and potential for growth. Guys, your job as a leader is to use all of the tools at your disposal. All of them. It doesn't matter what tool it is, as long as it's producing an effective outcome for yourself and for the people that you have an obligation and responsibility for. In this case, with the story I shared with you, my wife, I have an obligation and responsibility to protect, to provide, to preside for and over my wife and my children and the people that I love. And I got to look at this intuition as a tool in my tool bag, a tool in my arsenal to be able to produce the type of outcomes that I want, which is I want her to be safe, of course, right? You guys want your wives and your kids to be safe. I can't prove whether or not I was right or wrong. Frankly, it doesn't matter. She's going to get a car wash today or tomorrow, and everything will be fine. But I'm willing to listen. That's it. I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to make a little bit of sacrifice. It's not a lot, but I'm willing to make a little bit of sacrifice to incorporate this powerful and often overlooked tool that we have called intuition. Guys, I wish I had a framework for you. I do. I wish I had a framework and said, do these 10 things and everything will be fine and all your wildest dreams will come true. And I've done that in the past, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But in this case, a little different podcast, a little different information for you. But guys, use that tool called intuition. Use it, all right? Exercise it. Don't let it atrophy. Listen to it. I also got stories from people who didn't, by the way, listen to their intuition, and unfortunate and tragic situations and circumstances unfolded before their eyes, partly because they didn't listen to something they felt. So listen to it. Don't put yourself in a bad situation. But it's the trifecta of intel. It's emotion, it's rationale, and it's intuition. Use all three effectively and appropriately, and I think you will come out ahead. And the people you are serving will come out ahead as well. All right, guys. Let's stay in touch on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or Parler or wherever, YouTube, wherever you're doing the social media thing. Let me know what you think about this conversation we're having. Maybe you have some experiences. Maybe you have some additional insight as I failed to completely be able to articulate what it is that I'm talking about, because it is so difficult to talk about. But I'd love to hear from you guys. So Instagram is probably the best place, at Ryan Mickler. YouTube continues to grow. Make sure you check out the Battle Ready program, orderaman.com/battle ready. And then if you're on iTunes is best, but wherever you are, just 2 seconds, guys. Like I said, I went and I gave a rating for Andy Frisella's podcast, and it legitimately took me 2 seconds. I pulled up his thing, had the little stars, clicked on 5 stars, and it said, thank you for your feedback. That takes 2 seconds. So leave a rating, leave a review, do your part in sharing this work of reclaiming and restoring masculinity. Tap into your intuition. Guys, we'll be back next week for another interview. Until then, go out there, take action, tap into your intuition, and become the man you are meant to be.